In a case where the light isn't too awful, you might be wondering if it's okay to just lighten the face in RAW. So that's what I did here. It's better, and it looks like we've created a light pattern by the planes of the face that I lightened. But this is what adding light does. As you can see, it's far better than trying to fake it with Photoshop.
And showing them side by side really shows the difference. What about a situation where we have lots of white acting as reflectors all around the subject? You'd think that would provide plenty of fill, so we wouldn't need to add any more light, right? Okay, well, this is what we get right out of the camera with that kind of light. It's pretty drab. We could punch it up, but there's a better way. Adding a small amount of softbox flash establishes a much better light on the face. We can easily control where the light direction should be with flash. This is a natural or existing light image. He's in shade, but the background is lit by sunlight. This would be better if he were wearing high-key clothing, but his clothing is dark and out of key with the light background. So let's set the exposure based on the background, then add light to the subject with our softbox flash. So the procedure is to set the overall exposure for the background, then light the subject.
The row of trees in front of this guy is blocking sufficient facial light. I tried kicking light up at him from the reflector on the ground, but there just wasn't enough light to reflect. The result is that to get a sufficient exposure on him, the shutter speed ended up at about a 1/45th of a second, and the background went too light. I wanted the background to be in the same key as his clothing. His clothing is mid-key, whereas the background now looks high-key. When using flash, we set the f-stop for the amount of flash on the subject, and the shutter speed can be shortened to a 200th of a second or so to record a darker background. Using flash in this way allows us to change the key of the background by simply changing the shutter speed. The beauty of using an artificial light source is that you can place the light wherever you want the main light to be. I thought I'd like the placement here, but I changed my mind and quickly moved it here. It's easy to do with a small softbox on a light stand. There are some times when you just can't control light with overhead shaders or reflectors. Photographing someone in a lake is one of those times. Without adding any additional light, even on an overcast day with light all around, her eyes will go a little dark. The off-camera softbox flash fills in those shadowed areas. And because the softbox's light is coming at her at an acute angle, instead of at a 90-degree angle from the sky overhead, her skin color is enhanced. This was done in the afternoon, which is earlier than I normally work. The sun was behind her, but now we need to light her face. I used a reflector to lighten her face, but as you can see, even though I tried to keep the intensity low, it still made her squint. Using a softbox in as close as it can get solved the squinting problem. But on bright days you might not have enough power from a speedlight to produce enough light. In that case you can remove the front panel and just use the raw speedlight. You'll have more power, but harder light.
I choose to work outside in the evening for my portrait sessions because the light is more manageable, especially with weaker flash units like a speedlight. But this was at a teaching seminar and I had to work at the wrong time of day. I like soft light, but a speedlight doesn't have enough power when diffused through the internal baffle in a softbox during the daytime on a sunny day. I didn't want the barn in that background to be that light. I blocked some sunspots with my El Gobo, but the only way I could get enough power to balance with that barn was to remove the softbox panels and fire the speedlight straight at the subject. So that gave me the exposure I wanted on both her and the background. But the hard light isn't the look that I wanted for her. The only way to get soft light in sunlight is with a higher power flash than a single speed light. But then I put the panels back in the softbox because we had a brief cloud that covered the sun. You can see in this pullback how much more even the light is with the cloud cover. No hard contrast or shadows. And I got the result that I really wanted. But I got to tell you, this convinced me never to work at a time of day that doesn't guarantee me high quality results. What you really need in daylight is a strobe with enough power to diffuse it in a softbox and properly expose the subject in those bright surroundings. I'll talk more about that later. Another factor to consider in your choice of hard or soft light is which would be more appropriate to the theme. I started shooting with the softbox, but if he were being lit by streetlights, the light on him wouldn't be soft. Switching over to hard light, I think, is slightly more cohesive with the story. I had the flash on full power manual, but because the sky was still bright, I couldn't overpower that with the flash unit inside the softbox. So I removed the front baffles and went with the straight flash. That gave me plenty of flash power. Same thing here. Removing the front baffle gave me enough power from my speedlight to show the detail in the sky. In the next few images, I'll show the progression that I followed. Starting with the speedlight in my softbox, as I normally do, it's clear that there wasn't enough flash power in bright daylight. Also notice the camera settings. My speedlight in a softbox is good for f4 to 5.6 at the distances and ISOs that I normally work with. But that requires my shutter speed to be in high-speed sync territory in this bright sunlight, and that robs me of some power. So I removed the front baffle to reveal the bare speedlight. Now we have enough power to light him up. But the shadow side of his face is too dark. Again, note the camera settings. Because I have much more flash power to work with, I can now shoot at f13 and under the camera's maximum shutter sync speed to maximize my speedlight's power output. Same here. I just rotated the camera for a horizontal composition. Just to explain the basics here, f13 at a 1/60th of a second gives me the background exposure. The flash then lights up the person. Now here I also put a speedlight on top of the camera. That provided the right amount of fill light into the shadow area. By the way, this was all in TTL or through the lens metering, meaning the camera's brain took care of the flash exposure automatically.
Our senior sessions begin late in the afternoon so that I can work toward the better part of the day's light. That gives me more options than if I shot in the middle of the day. One option is to create images with different density backgrounds by simply adding light to the subject. In this shot, I just used ambient light for the exposure on her and let the sky go white. Then adding softbox flash made this, which shows the gorgeous colors in the late afternoon sky. Working into the later hours of the day means I only have to use a little power. To do that to the sky during the day would mean I'd have to use a lot stronger light than a single shoe mount flash can put out when diffused through a softbox. Let's explore another reason to add light from flash. Color correction. As I said earlier, sunny days are the most challenging because of the green light bouncing off of nearby grass and leaves. Without adding any white light, we'd have a nearly impossible task of correcting all that green. I added off-camera flash from the Larson softbox and the Canon 580EX at one stop under the existing light. You can see that it's starting to help produce better skin tones. At a flash output equal to the existing light, we've done a good job of cleaning up the skin tones and making light that's fairly natural looking. With flash at one stop over the ambient light, we've completely overpowered the green cast. But we've also added so much flash that it looks artificially lit. You can decide what amount you feel is the best compromise, but I prefer to start with flash at no exposure compensation and change it only when needed.
We were shooting in the evening, so the light was very blue. In addition, the background was lighter than she was. Other than accept an almost silhouette type of image, the best way to correct both problems is to add flash. As always, the softbox is just out of camera view.
Because of the mercury vapor light, there'd be no way to salvage the color on this image.
Flash overpowered that ugly light on her. The downside, of course, is now that everything else is really dark. I'd either have had to light it all with flash, or use the shadow recovery sliders in RAW, or just accept that darkness. When the subject is far away, I think it becomes even more important to have lighting that draws attention to the subject. The ambient light here was too subtle to be effective. I just took my cue from the ambient light and then accentuated that with flash.
At first glance, this image looks all right, but really it's not. We've got all kinds of color problems because of the sunlight bouncing off the green grass and a bright blue sky.
Adding a main flash to light her profile overpowered the blue color contamination trouble from the sky, and a black material on the ground took care of the green cast off of the sunlit grass.